What's going on, everyone? So it is incredible to see the impact that the new CBA has had. Obviously, there's been a lot of negatives with it. A lot of GMs and stuff have came out and been like, dude, it's like impossible to work around these things, right? Some GMs have explored different things. The Knicks found a loophole by signing guys that weren't on the roster to contracts so they could send them out. You have to get incredibly creative, but everybody, the consensus has came out has just been like, dude, it's incredibly restrictive, right? And you're seeing it. You're seeing very limited traction. You're seeing very limited moves and trades. Teams are terrified to take on long-term salary contracts. I mean, the only team that's really made moves is the Brooklyn Nets, but it's all been for expiring contracts, right? So, you're seeing the teams that are really struggling. You got all these sellers, all these teams that are willing to essentially blow up their rosters, and you got all these teams that are trying to win for championships that could all use multiple of these pieces, and none of them are biting right now. The Warriors are desperate to get somebody, and they haven't bought, right? Because they need to make sure it's the right guy, because if it's not, then they're stuck, right? And you're seeing multiple instances of stars just completely just getting bamboozled, right? It's just Brandon Ingram. Any other season, he probably would have already been traded. Team would have already picked him up, and he probably would have already signed a new max contract or extension, right? It would have already been done and over with. But now the new CBA, Brandon Ingram, he's probably Brandon Ingram might be one of the first real casualties of the CBA. A guy that probably would have gotten 40 plus million now is probably going to get 25 to 30 million out on the market because teams aren't willing to spend anymore. Because if you're a first, second apron team, those things hurt you, right? Those things are tough. Those things are restricted, especially if you're a second apron. You're essentially stuck. Right? That's it. You can't do anything. You can't sign buyout guys. You can't. You're limited to just vet minimum contracts in the offseason. Can't make trades. Can't do nothing. It's insane. So, you see guys like Brandon Ingram who, again, any given season, I think easily is probably a $40 million guy, right? Not this upcoming. I will be pretty surprised if a team. I mean, there's some bad teams that make bad decisions, so I wouldn't be shocked, but I'd be pretty surprised if a team gives Brandon Ingram 40 plus million. I just don't see that happening. Look, Jimmy Butler, any other season, Jimmy Butler would be one of the hottest commodities on the market. People would be stumbling all over himself, even at 36, right? People would be like, dude, that's the difference between us winning a championship. You'd probably have multiple teams. The Warriors probably would have already made it. Multiple teams probably would have already tried to trade for Jimmy Butler had this been the previous season, because it's okay, you just go into the tax. It's just basically how deep are your pockets at that point, right? You go into the tax, do what you need to do, you get it done, right? There's all kinds of ways to work around things, right? So go make that trade, get it done. But now, I mean, Jimmy Butler probably isn't even going to get moved. Probably going to end up having to stay in Miami, which is crazy for a guy that's probably done more with less than any star in the league. Jimmy Butler on pretty much, he's one of the few guys in the league that on any team could elevate them to contention, right? Because we've seen him do that. Maybe not so much the regular season, right? He loves to be a play-in team in the regular season for whatever reason. Come playoff time, he's a completely different animal, right? The guy's a completely different beast, and no one will touch him right now, right? No one's willing to line up and shovel out their assets and players and stuff, and Miami doesn't want to just give them away, and so it's just you have this standoff, and it's just are any of these teams really going to break? Are any of these teams really going to do anything? It's really odd. It's odd to see. Bradley Beal now wants out. Bradley Beal, all of a sudden, he's looking to be traded, but he has no trade clause for one, so you can't even find one of these bad teams to dump the contract to or something, right? He has to approve any type of trade that he gets through or gets done, and again, what team is trading for he's making $50 million this year. By the time his contract's up $60 million, who only plays 40, 50 games a season, right? And that's another thing about all these guys, like Brandon Ingram, Bradley Beal, even Jimmy Butler. These guys that don't have the best injury history. These guys played 75 to 80 games a season. It might be a very different conversation, right? Maybe some of these teams would take a chance because it's 50, 60 million. But man, he's making, he's playing 70 game season. So like, maybe you talk yourself into it and justify it, but it's like these guys are all making 40 plus million and 2K's 50 plus million. And it's like, they're only playing 50 games a season. So it's like, is that really best for our team? And we're going to be incredibly restricted on what we can do to fill out and build around these guys. That like you add that into, okay, well, we need this guy to play 70, 80 games a season if we want a chance, right? And it's like, oh, he's playing half of that. So it's like, like what kind of trades, what kind of moves are you making? It's just, it's interesting. Like, I really do think it's very fascinating seeing that, like, you have all these guys that on any other night, any other occasion, any other potential trade, like, they would be gone. Like, teams would have already snatched up, especially for some of, like, the prices that some of these guys are rumored to be had. Like, Brandon Ingram you could essentially get for free, right? Like, you just got to, like, maybe a couple seconds or something like that, right? Like, supposedly, Brandon Ingram would have already been traded if they could have just gotten, like, equivalent talent. If they would have gotten, like, enough to, like player-wise, not even asset-wise, just, like, an equivalent, like, a piece that makes sense for them, right? Like, teams are like, nah, you tell you what, you keep him, right? And then he's going to go in the offseason, and he's going to want 40-plus minutes. I just don't see it. Because the only guys, and this is something that I talked about in the offseason, like, right, you're going to see the shift in contracts in the next year or two. You're going to see a lot of guys that would have gotten, so, like, the days of, like, those, like, like, middle contracts, I think, are gone, right? The, like, 18 to, like, 23 million range are probably gone, right? Like, you're either going to be like a vet minimum guy, a mid-tier guy, which will probably be like, whatever, 8 to 15 range, or you're the max guy. Like, I think that those like, guys making 22 million a year or whatever, like a Bruce Brown contract, right? Like I think those will probably be a thing of the past, unless a guy like takes it, like instead of, like, hey, this guy would be a $30 million or a $25 million guy, but he's taking 22. My point is, like, I think that those middle of the line contracts are done, and I think a lot of, like, these overpaid guys are done. Right? A lot of guys are going to lose a lot of money because of this new CBA, which is crazy because it had to be approved by the Players Association, right? Like, no one, it just feels like all sides didn't really think this through, right? It doesn't seem like people really thought this through. Like, this punishes the teams that care, which I always think is stupid, right? Because they always say, like, we want parity in the league. We want to have all these teams. Do you know how many teams in the league don't care about winning? Like, half the teams in the league could care less. Right? Half the teams, like, are just either terribly managed and organized, or the owners just care about the money. They just want to make as much money as possible, right? Like, so why? Like, those teams are never going to change. Like, those teams aren't going to wake up one day and be like, oh, well, we got a new CBA, so now we can compete. Like, no. Like, the days of, like, LA and all these huge markets, like, if you're not going there, that's it, you're not making money, are gone. Like, you have guys, basically, Giannis makes more money than, like, everyone in the league, and he's in Milwaukee, right? Like, social media and advertisements, all that, it's a different world, right? You don't need to be in LA to make $1 billion anymore, right? But people still will want to go to places like LA, like Miami. People are still going to want to go to the big markets because they can expand their beyond the basketball court brand, but also just the lifestyle, right? Like, LA with the beaches and the girls and the nightlife and all that. Same thing with like a Miami, stuff like that. Those are always going to be destinations for guys. However, you see a lot of like European guys are here now, and they're the top players in the league, right? And they don't care. Like, they're not worried about any of that stuff. Like, Jokic is like a great example. Like, that dude just wants to like come here in the during work hours, play ball, and then just like go back to his country and play with his horses. Like, the guy's like a prime example of like they don't care. Like, it's a different league, right? But teams don't care. So why would you punish the teams that do care? Right? Like, you have teams that are willing to overpay. Like, Steve Ballmer has deep pockets, and if he wants to spend $20 billion to try to win a championship, then that's good for him, then let him do it. Right? Like, like we've seen that you can't just buy championships in the NBA. There's been countless situations where that has happened, right? I mean, look, Phoenix tried to buy a championship, and it was a disaster. It's not as simple as just getting 5 guys. Look, I'm a Laker fan. Lakers have had several teams that you look at the names on the back of the jerseys, you're like, no one should beat this team, right? Like Steve Nash, Pau Gasol, Metta World Peace, Kobe Bryant, and Dwight Howard. And Dwight Howard was like, this is Orlando Dwight. Like, that team should have ran. That team shouldn't have lost a game. The team should have went 82-0. And they did, and they barely made the playoffs. And it took Kobe tearing his Achilles to do it, right? Like, it's very different. But anyway, just kind of wanted to talk about this and rant about it. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Kind of mix in the middle. However you feel. Love to hear it. So let me know down in the comments. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me a lot. So we enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. Not subscribe channel, hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one. Thank you.